Good morning. PJ and I are sitting down with Bakai, the co-founder of Plio, a fuel optimization tool. Bakai, thanks for taking the time to demo this with us today. Before we jump into it, can you tell us a little bit about your background or how you got into this and why you're building this tool?
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah, grew up in Germany and moved to the States, and now started this company with my younger brother, actually, who's been a software engineer in AI for the past couple of years. And we used to be running data pipelines, data platforms for bigger Fortune 1000 companies. And when all the AI hype happens, a friend of ours that actually runs a third-party logistics firm, 3PL, reached out to just say, like, hey, can you guys help me? And we looked into it, and of course, 3PL was so much. But what piqued our interest was when he was telling us how messy it actually is on the trucking side of the business, and started there, started talking to some carriers, and yeah, found that it's actually a very interesting bunch to work with, very business-minded, business-oriented, but the whole AI topic was more like, everyone's talking about it. I know I need to do something, but I don't know where to start. So we spent actually a couple of months working with a couple of carriers, more on the like a 100 truck range. And so from there, we learned that actually one of the most interesting use cases to start the whole AI journey is actually on the fuel stop recommendation side of things. Because when we talk to carriers, and I'll show you more about what we actually do in a bit, but we actually heard that, hey, they want to go on the AI journey, but tough market out there. And we all know that. They also said, hey, we don't have time to essentially wait for 12 months for some productivity gains to hit. We need something that saves us money today. And yeah, the fuel stop recommendation, the use case does that. So that's how we got started.
Cool. And are you showing drivers or carriers where to stop for fuel, or are you showing them, hey, the drivers on their logs, this is where they need to take a break due to hours? What are you guys trying to solve?
Yeah, actually, let me pull up my demo here. We won't go into too much detail, but I'll answer your question in a sec, Paul. But essentially, the idea that we hear is, hey, people do care about cutting costs. And what we do is we essentially tell drivers to or where to stop to fuel up, taking into account the hours of service, calculating the actual correct net price after IFTA, taking into account any fuel discounts the carrier might already have. So when we actually talk to these carriers, they say, hey, obviously fuel is a big cost after driver wages. And they know that, hey, I could probably save 10 cents, 15 cents, maybe if my driver's fueled at the correct stop. I think everyone knows this. If you drive along a route, there are better and worse places to fuel. So that's essentially what we do, is tell them, hey, instead of fueling at this station, maybe drive another 20 miles, and you'll actually save 20 cents, 30 cents a gallon, and that averages out to quite some good savings. But yeah, usually when we talk to them about that, what we hear is it's like, hey, yeah, I know that probably there's some savings in this. I don't know how much savings actually, but anyways, my dispatchers are completely overloaded already. So there's nothing I can add on to their plate anyways. And they also hear, like with HMD trucking, right? I think your asset division actually has a fuel team, which shows the most sophisticated carriers know this and they do it, and it's ROI positive. But clearly, smaller carriers might not have the expertise or just the budget to hire and manage and train those people. So those two options tend to be tricky. And of course, then that's where we come in with the AI service, which is just new, right? It's not like it's been around forever. It's a thing in the last couple of months that's not possible. So that's actually what we bring into the conversation. And that's a good place to start if carriers are interested in going on an AI journey and save money today.
Awesome.
Yeah, maybe just to jump ahead here, and then feel free to jump in with any questions that might be interesting also for the broader trucking or logistics community. But essentially what we see when working with some of these carriers is, let's say, just taking an example here, if you talk about a fleet with 100 trucks, company drivers, and do 2,900 miles a truck a week, then you end up with these numbers that you can see here on the screen. And just assuming a 10 cent per gallon kind of saving, which is a good average, like some run much more efficiently for whatever reason, then save maybe 8, 9 cents, some kind of fuel all over the place and not just at the contracted fuel stops, then you could save even 20, 25 cents. But this is like a good number, realistic number you can aim for. And that translates to $4,200 in savings a week, or up to $18,000 a month, which goes straight to the bottom line. So this is quite interesting for a lot of carriers, especially in these tough markets. And yeah, we talked about it earlier today. Drivers just fuel up randomly, because how would a driver know like all the stops along the way and do all the calculations? Of course, then an algorithm or an AI can do that much better.
So quick question here, right? How are the fuel savings being quantified? So for example, if I have a discount program with Pilot or Flying J, are you benchmarking fuel stops using our discount that we have? Or are you referencing retail non-discounted fuel? Because
Yeah.
that seems like a high number to me based on the amount of trucks. So can you walk us through how that's quantified?
Yeah, absolutely. So we actually calculate the savings already taking into account your discounted fuel prices. So most carriers, also even at the smaller size, of course, have some contracts and get discounts. They fuel up at very different prices than what is on retail. And we essentially look at where, let's say in the last month, where did you fuel with all your trucks? And then we calculate, just tracing back, hey, where would have been the optimal fuel stop? And then we take that delta. So it takes into account the already discounted price that you have, and then compare that against if you fueled at the right stop. Does that answer the question, PJ?
Yeah, no, absolutely. So how does this work? Is there a UI? Are you integrating, or?
Yeah. So the way you can think about it is that Plio acts like almost like a dedicated fuel team. Like the bigger fleets have a handful of people that do nothing else than looking at these routes and communicating with the drivers after looking at where to fuel. So it's essentially, there's like three main parts here. The first one is our system, our tool detects along a route, like pickup and delivery, what are all the fuel stops, and there's some logic to how this works, as in picking the best stops. And then our AI agent actually does the communication with the driver. Now, this is something that's different from carrier to carrier, like whether it's via messages or phone calls, our AI can do that. And maybe for some of the carriers out there, you might already have noticed when you call brokers or spot loads that your dispatchers might have already run into an AI voice agent. And these are really good these days. Essentially, you can think of this as, there's like a virtual employee AI agent that then communicates with the driver. Like in this example, hey, across the route, can you please fuel up here? And then it can even react to when, let's say, the driver has some preference or some constraint. They communicate, hey, sorry, can't really stop right now because I've got to make my next stop, or whatever it might be. And the AI can take that into account and basically come up with the next best option, taking into account whatever the driver communicated. And there's more going on to continuously optimize this, but that's what's essentially happening under the hood. And I can show an example as well.
Yeah, if you could, that'd be great. And then what factors is it considering, right? So is it pulling hours of service, pickup appointment, delivery appointment times, what fuel's left in the tank, right? What does it all pull in? What is it considering to make that decision?
Yeah. Let me answer that first, and then maybe I'll just show a quick example in terms of what, let's say, an owner would actually see and what, let's say, the AI kind of works off on. But yeah, so it takes into account the service, of course, any routes that need to be taken. For instance, avoiding toll roads, that's something that the carrier wants. Takes into account the fuel levels. So it depends a bit. Different carriers have different rules around it. It depends a bit on the load. And if the broker has any conditions where, hey, you always need to have at least 50 gallons, whatever that might be, it's really, taking into account at least the hours of service, calculates the correct prices with the IFTA, and of course, it calculates the reach and the fuel tank levels to make sure that this makes sense.
Also, with the AI agent, how is the driver communicating with that agent? Is it texting on the app to ask the question saying, I need a shower, or is he calling his dispatcher who is then on Plio on his computer? How is that working?
Yeah. So we have different options here. So the carriers that we're working with right now have opted to basically treat like Plio as a separate employee. So they would introduce the driver to, hey, we're working with the service, Plio. And so in case of the example, like one of the examples is we basically just text message the driver through Plio. and do the voice calls. And there's a phone number that the driver can then call. So in that case, it's basically we act as an outsourced, almost a fuel team with the technology, Plio. Some other carriers we talked to were interested in at some point letting the dispatchers do this. So there's different options, whether we expose this to a dispatcher that can then kind of review the recommendations and then send them ahead after they reviewed them, where it's like on full autopilot where basically no dispatcher needs to touch this.
Cool.
Yeah, but then maybe just quickly jumping into the actual product. And this is for demo purposes, right? Not real data, but I think it's gonna give a good sense of, hey, what can this look like? So I'm just pulling that up here. Give me one sec. All right, here we go. So this is the view that, let's say, accounting or the owner or an operations manager that kind of looks at how much are we actually saving? Is this kind of doing a good job? I would see. So there's this dashboard view essentially that tells like, hey, and in this case, how many of the recommendations have actually been followed. So of course, the Plio makes these recommendations to the drivers, but we're measuring also what's the actual compliance, like how often is this followed and how is this developed over time. Of course, we just play back like all the basic information, like how much was actually fueled, what was the cost, et cetera, et cetera. And of course, most importantly, how much are we saving here on any given week? And then we show you that kind of over time. So the baseline is essentially, hey, if you had fueled like you did in the past, how much would the cost been, and then how much are we saving against that? And of course, fuel prices fluctuate. We all know that. So it doesn't necessarily mean that this week is always going to be cheaper than it's always been in the past, but it's always going to be, you can rest assured that with this, you're always fueling at the optimal prices and gas stations. And then when you scroll down here, you can see, hey, what's going on for every single, let's say, trip. Where did we stop? How much did we save on that trip by fuel following these recommendations? And then you can even dive in deeper. Honestly, like we have this view, and in the beginning, owners look into it because they're curious and want to see what's going on. But after a time, it's okay. I'm saving the money. I don't actually need to see this anymore. But just to give you a sense for like how this looks like. So right here, I can go into the details, and if anyone's interested, of course, happy to chat and show that. And just to show here as an example, if a driver actually replies, hey, can I switch to some other stop? The AI can react to it, recalculate, and then basically come up with the next best stop in real time. So yeah, that's
how often is this dashboard being like updated? Is it every week? Are you doing it daily? Can the owner of the company see every day he saved $1,000 on fuel?
Yeah. So this is updated in real time in the sense that these trips, as they come in or are going on, are updated. So you just see that. And then the savings you'll see updated on a daily basis. In this view, it's just a weekly one, but it's basically real time.
Okay. Awesome.
Okay. And then this can look confusing. So I'm just going to show it briefly to show the tech under the hood. You might be familiar with this view if you use a tool like Samsara. So in this case, we are connecting to Samsara and essentially pulling the fuel level from that information system, pulling the trip data. We can connect to the TMS if kind of to see the pickup and delivery. Depends a bit on the setup of the carrier. But essentially, like in this example, where we're following the trip and seeing, hey, what's the fuel level been? What are stops along the route? What's to consider? And this is just to visualize really what's happening under the hood, because of course the AI kind of doesn't need an actual like UI in the sense, but this can help to just understand, hey, what's actually going on. But let me pause it here. I don't want to go into too much of the technicals and just come back to like the higher level view on the slides. All right. Okay.
The numbers to see, is there obviously is there a difference, I guess a big difference between a company that has a contract with a fuel company versus a company that's just fueling anywhere? Have you what's the percentage savings? Because it's probably going to be more beneficial to someone who just fuels anywhere.
Oh yeah. Admittedly, we haven't yet done the actual fuel savings estimate with a company that doesn't have like a contracted fuel discount. But just from estimations, from what we see, because of course there's like other apps and stuff that you can use to get some discounts. So that's a bit more tricky. But those savings tend to be even bigger just because the spread of cost is so much higher. So I'd guesstimate just from the data that we see, it could be in the 30, 40 cents kind of region. It really depends. Like sometimes these carriers don't have anything at all. And then you talk about those kinds of savings. Usually they also tend to be smaller. So the absolute amount isn't that high. but of course, it's just relatively speaking much more. And some of them are super savvy and they use at least some of the apps, then some have some of the discounts, and some of them just don't use anything, and then it's crazy savings. But yeah, frankly speaking, we haven't worked with a carrier like that yet, but yeah, I'd imagine the savings are much, much bigger.
Okay. And so like the main target audience is probably carriers that have company drivers, because the owner of the company is going to care more, but still a company or a carrier with a bunch of owner operators, they could pay for Plio, and that's just an additional offering for recruiting. Hey, we have this tool Plio, sign up with us, we'll get you on board with it. You'll buy fuel 15 cents less than the national average if you come work with us.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah. So I think the, let's say, ideal customer, at least right now, is definitely someone that has mostly company trucks, company drivers, because it the savings directly come to their bottom line. We talked to some carriers that have owner ops where, depending on the size, right, of the business, where you might want to offer this right to owner ops as a service. And of course, then you increase the number of drivers that are actually fueling in the network, which then again gives better discounts, etc. So it can be very interesting from that perspective. But then obviously what I keep hearing as well is, hey, owner ops, and great to work with them, but they also tend to just know or think they know what's best. So it's really different. It depends on the carrier. But yeah, there's definitely benefit to working with us for owner ops as well, but it's definitely much, much bigger for the ones with company drivers.
Cool.
Yeah, so maybe to wrap up here, and then if there's any remaining questions, but just to show, hey, the carriers that we have worked with, like what's the journey that they go through, like just assuming, hey, I'm interested in this, it sounds promising. Essentially what we're saying is, hey, there's free money for you, and you don't need to change much. Sometimes we get that, oh, it doesn't make so much sense. Is it really true? So what we do is actually for carriers that are interested to do just a fuel savings estimate. And we basically, and depending on kind of what systems, what data you have, we plug into that. We can analyze for you, hey, what has been the historical fueling behavior and how much money are you leaving on the table? And at the very least, how efficiently your fleet already runs when it comes to fuel stops. But if you say, hey, those savings that we're estimating based on your data actually look interesting, you can decide to do a pilot, test this with 10 trucks, see how it works on the driver compliance side of things. And then, of course, if that works out great, we roll this out into an ongoing partnership. And I do just want to re-emphasize that we set out to bring AI and help kind of carriers get ready for the next wave. And this is just the beginning, right? There's so many more things that you can do. Another example is, can we avoid toll roads? Can we automate detention collection? And there's another 10, 20K savings in all of these use cases. And it's much more about selecting some place to start, ideally something that doesn't take forever to show value. And there's so many more things you can do on the AI side of things. But yeah, so this is just to show you very briefly, hey, this is like an example report that we did. So it shows, just in summary, there's a more detailed one, but basically, hey, what was the data before Plio? What was it after? And then how does it translate into the savings? And here's just some more examples in terms of, hey, sometimes you might know this already, but state borders matter, right? Some states are just much more expensive than others. So you take that into account. Sometimes, I'm not saying Plio is always going to find like a stop that's 20 cents cheaper. Like sometimes the driver just happens to also fuel up at a good station, and then there's barely any savings. And sometimes it gets more complex, whereas, hey, you fuel up a bit less at one station, but then you fuel up much more when it's a cheaper station. And how do you do this without having too many stops? And so there's a lot of things that get more advanced, which kind of allows like these savings. But yeah, just to give you an idea, it's not like every trip you're going to save 10 cents or 20 cents. Sometimes it's 1 cent, sometimes it's 15 cents. But this is like the average that comes out of all of this. But yeah, I'm going to shut up here and see if there might be any questions.
No worries. So I do have a question. So is Plio only taking into consideration the current load that the driver's assigned? Or also, let's say I have an inbound shipment to Pennsylvania or New Jersey, and then I have a backhaul already assigned back to, let's say, Ohio, right? For example, will it consider the backhaul as well? And then essentially let the driver know maybe how much to fuel or when to fuel? And also, I guess let's start there. And I might have a follow-up depending on the answer.
Yeah. So with the more advanced fleets that kind of, do have some kind of dedicated, have a backhaul kind of planned it out, we can take that into consideration, as in essentially if you have the data of pickups, deliveries, future pickup deliveries, etc., we can even look at all the trips and estimate, hey, usually, even if it's spot and you don't know yet what you haven't booked the actual backhaul or the next kind of trip, we can guesstimate essentially based on historicals. Hey, okay, if you go to Florida, you probably go somewhere not too far because the rates are really shitty. And it depends a bit on the carrier, of course. So we can estimate like what's going to happen and take it into account. But of course, the more data the carrier has based on their TMS or their system of how they work, the more we can take into account. So the short answer would have been yes, if the carrier has that information.
Okay, excellent. So for me, the only concern really comes down to like driver compliance, right? Like I've seen what you've done with AI, and it's definitely I'm past the point of yeah, it sounds good, but maybe I'm not there yet as a company. It genuinely works, and it's like magic. It's just hard to understand or explain. But driver compliance, right? So
Yeah.
for me, it's hey, if I integrate, I'm not very confident that all of my drivers will comply. Like on your example that you had on the UI you pulled up, the dashboard, it was like 88%. So what if it's, I don't think maybe 50, right? Or less. So how would maybe you can speak to, have you had any of that come up like with existing customers, and how have they tackled that? Because I feel for me to increase compliance, it would still take some manual labor, for existing drivers, new drivers that are being onboarded, I can just go over this in orientation, set the expectation, and 9 times out of 10, they're going to follow it. But compliance is still a question mark for me.
Yeah, absolutely. And definitely, I think this is the number one kind of concern that we hear when talking to carriers. Like usually after we've done especially after we've done the fuel savings estimate, everyone's like, okay, sounds like a no-brainer to do this, but it might not be because of driver compliance. And the reality is, I think I'm going to give like a two-part answer. The first part is, if you take a step back, and I know every carrier, every owner thinks, hey, and I think it's true, my drivers are particularly tricky, and I get it. But I also feel drivers mostly just fuel wherever it's convenient. So if you really talk to them or think about it, it's just like, hey, they don't think too much about where to fuel. It's okay if I stop here, I might as well fuel here or just do that. And the AI essentially doesn't change that behavior much, right? It's more like, hey, right now the driver kind of spontaneously thinks that, oh, it's just fuel because my fuel level's kind of low and just do it. And here the AI just takes over that mental load. It's not like we're asking them to think more, do more. It's more, hey, please fuel here, or like how you would usually say, hey, please, if you avoid toll roads, then that they just do it, depending on, of course, some of the situation is set up. So what we've seen is surprisingly, actually, for some of the carriers that we work with, that driver compliance starts actually to be pretty good, much better than they expected. But of course, it's hard to take that at face value. I get that, which is why we do these pilots, right, to show what's possible. And if there's no savings, then obviously we don't charge anything. That's a risk-free way to just check this, because I could be telling you anything here, but I'd say give it a shot. You'd be surprised. But at the same time, and that's like the second part, even if, right, let's say it's 50% compliance, you're not saving 18,000, you're saving 9 to 10,000. And okay, like maybe you even need to include this in orientation and have a chat once with your drivers. It's still significant savings, at least to me, especially in this market where you're probably maybe even running at a slight negative or just barely any margin. We've seen that carriers say, oh, okay, it's like worth it to do it. So a lot of times I think it's more the hesitation of like trying something new, and it's a very valid concern with the driver behavior and compliance. But yeah, even if it's only 50%, that's that. And actually, now that I think about it, that's the third thing that came up, because I remember there's one carrier that we're talking with, like roughly 80, 90 company trucks. He was also saying, hey, guys, it seems like we could use this as the kind of start for doing driver incentive pay or performance pay. And I don't know about HMD trucking, but I'm pretty sure like most of the advanced bigger fleets have some form of kind of driver performance because it's not just about where do you fuel, right? It's also like later, can you influence the driver behavior as to speeding, safety, and compliance? And this is actually a good place to start to explore doing something like driver incentive pay. And there's different variations of it to make this work. Like another carrier we were talking to, like idling time is another like issue, for instance. And what they did is just, hey, there's like a leaderboard of drivers. You can collect points, right? If you follow certain behaviors and like good practices. And there's a raffle among the top 3 for whoever kind of gets the family vacation, right? On a monthly basis, and taking part of the savings that you generate. I'm rambling here, but what I'm trying to say is you'd be surprised. It's much better than you would expect. Even if it only is 50%, 60%, it's still worth it, honestly. And then it is a journey, right? Building these habits. And it's not just about the fuel stop recommendations. You want to be going on the journey of, improving driver behavior over time, because that's what the best fleets, the most sophisticated fleets are doing.
Yeah, that's a good idea. If you implement some type of revenue share with the driver or dispatcher, you're going to get the compliance to go up pretty quickly.
Okay,
Cool.
excellent. So what does this cost?
Yeah, it depends a bit on kind of the savings we can generate. Usually we aim to at least generate good 4 to 5 times ROI. There's no upfront cost. It's not like you're paying whatever, $10,000 to set this up and then figure things out. It's a month to month. And then it depends on the fleet size, honestly.
Oh, wow. So there's no upfront cost, like no implementation cost, and you're essentially just profit sharing, right?
Yeah, exactly.
I mean,
exactly.
there's no risk.
Yes, of course. I understand everyone's really busy. So of course you always got to invest the time to explore this. But from a financial perspective, look, we're super convinced. We got into this business because we're really interested in helping like these carriers make more money. This is a month to month. And what I love about all these owner-led companies, I think everyone understands the ROI, but also there's no bullshit. Like we're not here to try and sell the lock you into some contract and then it doesn't work, which is why we're doing these month-to-month things. We're very confident. If you save money, I think you'll be happy to share that instead of hiring and say a big team with us. And if it doesn't work for whatever reason, then there's no need to work together on this use case. There might be others. So that's how it works.
Cool. Well, BK, thanks for taking the time to hop on with us today and tell us more about Plio. If anyone's interested and wants to learn more, please DM one of us. Be happy to hop on a call and walk you through and see how this can save your company quite a bit of money and fuel.
Okay, excellent. Yeah, we can do that.
All right. Yeah,
Cool.
if there's nothing else for now, thanks a million, guys, for having me and us on for this conversation. And great stuff you guys are doing with Logistics War Room and building this community. It's not just us, right? In terms of AI solutions, there's a lot of technology out there. It's tricky for carriers to navigate this. So I think any conversation like we're having today to just, educate the market on what's possible, it's going to be great. And looking forward to connecting with the community.
Awesome.
Likewise.